in principle, this should be working. I have no idea whether it's actually working, so let's find out. Hey, it looks like it is. Magic. All right, I'm going to go ahead and post this. Hello, everyone. And I'm going to get things into the right spots. This can go over here, and I'm going to go tell everybody, hey, this is live. Still exceedingly new at this. I've done it like twice. Let's not look at that. I now live streaming. How do I? Where's the stream link? That one, I guess. YouTube.com/Chris Cracho. That's the one. And I'm going to copy the link to it. All right. And no one else. That's my kids. We're not going to see them again. So right now what I'm working on, and hopefully everybody will get some benefit out of this at least, is converting Ember element helper to be a TypeScript file. And I'm almost done with it. And when I finish this one, I'm going to pick up another small library and just keep going. Do this for probably an hour or so this morning. Right now, I am in the middle of getting the very complicated thing, which is the element helper, to be fully realized as the appropriate sort of thing. Let me grab Safari here, and I'm going to go to Embroider. The thing I was working on is figuring out if Embroider utils, which has this lovely ensure safe component type, is doing the right thing in a more recent version. Right now, the type it hands back is unknown, and it needs to be the type of the thing passed in. So utils, packages, utils, I assume exists somewhere. Ensure safe component, that's the one from Embroider util. Yep. Go here, add on, index, ensure safe component. Okay, it is just in JS right now, TIL, so let's find the types. This is often the case. This needs to be util index.d.ts. And it is not. So let's go back real quick and look at the actual behavior. I believe what this does is take the input. It's got a string, and it's going to go deprecate it and then look up the component definition. Yep. Otherwise, if it's already a component definition, we'll hand it back. And then if it's class, it's going to look it up, make sure it's valid, registered, and hand back a component definition. So we need to think about what the type here needs to be. It's going to be roughly, I'm going to test it out here and then stream it. Component is going to be string or glimmer component or really what I actually want this to be, and we're going to have to think about how to do this, is I actually want this to more or less say import component like from glint. I should have this in here. There it is, glint template. That's what I thought it was. And component like is a named import. Really, I want to be able to just say, give me anything that fulfills the normal contract of a component. And I will hand back something where maybe I'm going to have S as a signature and C extend string or component like S and S. This is going to be C, so that I can say that C extends string. It's going to hand back component like unknown. Otherwise, it's going to hand back C. I think if we had this, type would be more or less safe. This could now be, I've defined a tag name or null, really, because that's how it starts. Whenever I'm converting TypeScript, I always just start with what's the actual existing implementation and go from there. In this case, it's a little complicated because we're saying I'm going to take in a tag name and it has to be a valid name, which I believe here is actually HTML, SVG element. Tag name map. So the valid names are symbol or object or aber or canvas, or there are many of them. And the way the helper actually works is it just sets it up with initial empty values for that, and it uses this uninitialized, which is just an empty function, basically a singleton, to be as cheap as it can, or one of these valid names. Given a tag name, it'll then construct a class for it. So given this, what we want to say is I've got a dynamic element which extends Ember component with a tag name of this. We won't actually need the signature in this case. In other cases we would, because we would want to preserve the type parameterization of a signature, that is of the component with its signature. So it takes in the tag name and it returns a tag with that name, which is how I'm shorthanding this right now, where tag says this is a component-like thing, which is Glint's idea of this could be an Ember component, it could be a Glimmer component, it can be anything that implements the basic contract for component using a component manager on the runtime side and Glint's notion of what a component is on the dynamic, or rather the static type side. And that's going to hand back this element for the name. So given one of those names, if it's from the element name map, cool, it's an element name. If it's from the SVG name map, cool, it's there. I'm actually going to disable prettier for this because I think it will be clearer done this way. This is a pretty common convention in TypeScript land. Prettier ignore. There we go. So you'll get back a component-like thing whose element, whatever you can splattribute onto, is based on the actual name you passed in, and a block it'll just yield. And that'll end up looking something like, this won't actually work here, but you can imagine being able, this is how it works. You can say let element div as tag. If this were a Glimmer TS file, this would work. So the syntax highlighting works now. It's not set up to compile it, but that's fine. I'm just showing how this works. You'd write tag, and you can write ... attributes, and any attributes or modifiers or whatever that are passed in only work if this is actually a div. So that's sort of the idea here. TypeScript, delete all of this. One of the things I want to do here is make this type check. So this is a little interesting. We're doing something pretty dynamic here, and I'm trying to think through the right way to capture it and represent it without doing a unsafe cast. This works because under the hood it's using an Ember component and using the old Ember component tag name to do it. What we really need to do, if we were doing this with a normal static type definition, I would do it by writing a declaration merge with an interface. I would say, interface dynamic element extends and apply the component here. Actually, we may be able to, Ember component has a signature, right? So this should actually be able to take an appropriate signature, which will be this. It's the actual same thing. So I'm going to extract that and say interface tag signature. Oh. And again, name extends valid names. I may be able to actually simplify that and make it string in a moment. I will come back to that. But here I'm going to say this is tag signature over the name. And then here I will say tag signature name. Boom. Okay, so now we type check. This is going to say, whoops, this could be null. Because right now TypeScript can't see that we're only going to assert in debug. At actual prod builds, it's not going to do the right thing. I see Ilya in the chat. Hello, Ilya. I don't know how long ago you said hello. It was a minute. Welcome. So the idea here, this assertion is intentionally only run in debug. That's interesting. I need to think on this a little bit because ultimately here, assert should already be only running in debug. I think the idea is that we only want to build up this message when we're in debug, and then the assertion runs either way. Basically just trying to avoid doing this work in prod builds. So I need to think on that. There are also possibly some opportunities for optimization here I was thinking about. Right now, anytime you instantiate a helper, so anytime you write a helper invocation, you're going to end up constructing one of these classes dynamically with the appropriate tag name. There's a trade-off here. That means that you're going to end up garbage collecting that class for that tag name whenever you tear down that helper. So you've got some garbage collection churn that could be happening, especially if you're doing that in a hot path, because you're not just tearing down the instance, you're actually tearing down the class, which means if you have 3 different places where you call element helper with div, you're going to, as far as I can tell here, get a different class. We want to avoid doing the ensure safe component, the thing I was describing here, and looking at in GitHub here. We don't want to do this check every time because that would be expensive. So caching it or dodging it makes sense. That's why this is stateful. But one move we could make, and I'm not going to do during the conversion, and we need to think and test about how this works, is just allocate one for every tag that we instantiate in module scope. Just create a tag map equals new map from string to component like really it would be for tag of that string, which this gets hard to constrain. There's ways we could write it, but if this just said name extends string and we that down the rest of the way so that this just needs to be a string, I think that's fine. And then here similarly this just needs to be a string. The signature needs to be a string. We could then have a lookup that's something like, give me, instead of doing if the tag name isn't the existing tag name, instead just say if let existing equals tag tag map dot get tag name. If not existing, do the setup validation, else return exists. And in the end, we're actually going to just do something like let component and set it up, and we would just return the component. I don't know yet whether that'll be a win or not. It's a fairly obvious thing to think about at the moment. This is going to be or string, and then I can get rid of this valid names type. I am going to keep that almost certainly. I'm not going to keep this for now, obviously. And we're going to have to go update embroider util to do this. If it's a string, we can't know what it is. We could maybe do some shenanigans with the registry. And this will only work in the case where we're willing to take on a peer dependency for glint template in embroider util. It's a thing we need to think about. I think in a lot of cases, it's probably worth it. It's probably the right trade-off, but there is a trade-off there. I think as long as we take a peer dep on at least 1.0 beta, though, that should be fine, because we really need that type to be able to hand this exact thing back for many use cases. So this now type checks other than here, where we're going to end up having to cast it because of this run in debug being something that TypeScript correctly says, hey, this could still be null. In our case, okay, it actually can always be null. So we'll just return null. It is possible for it to return nothing. In the case where you intentionally want to say this should not be a component, I want a null tag here, which is a valid thing to do. You pass in null, and I believe in that case we want to say tag name extends string or null. I need to look at the actual README here and see what the spec is. I may have to go look at the RFC, which was merged. RFC is at ember.js.com, and we want 0389. This will be the easiest place to read it. Pass null or undefined, it will return null. Okay, so that's the spec here. The args are going to be name or null or undefined, and same thing here. And in principle, this should be right, yeah. This should give us the right type. We could maybe overload this. I'm thinking about, Ilya, I see your question. Again, probably a couple minutes late. In the end, it should be. It was spec'd as such, and it needs to ultimately be moved into core. It needs to be actually implemented in the VM. Right now, it's not, and we need to think about how to get it there, find somebody to do the work. In the meantime, though, I just want to have the types open, unblocked, so that we can get this done as a community in terms of being able to use it. If I'm working on a app or add-on that uses it, I should be able to have types integrated with glint, etc. And then a lot of the mechanics here that I'm working out will just be able to backport to actually being able to do the same types in glint directly when it's a built-in. One of the interesting questions that is currently unanswered, is I don't think there's an import specified for this. Yeah, that's correct. There is not. So we'll need to go backfill that. Is it a built-in? Like, you don't import let in strict mode. But I suspect you're going to be importing elements. Certainly today you do. Now the thing I'm thinking about here is there are two ways to think about this. This should be tag name or null. We could also represent this and say type element helper signature alt name extend string equals either that, or this is the same for the moment. Tag name null or undefined. I'm going to remove these. By doing this, we can actually provide more concrete feedback to someone as an end user. So I'm going to comment this out and make this the correct thing. So the idea here would be, okay, this is the implementation of it. So from an implementation point of view, this seems fine. Tag name is an interesting thing I'm going to come back to in a moment. Since this is now allowed to be null or undefined, we need to actually change the type here and allow it to include or null or undefined. If type of tag name equals string, I'm going to come back to this because it's not capturing, well, I can just cast it here. I'm going to write a safety comment. Safety. The callback is synchronous, so we can be guaranteed that the tag name is still valid per the check for equals string on the line above. And anytime I'm doing a cast, I'm going to do this kind of thing. I do not like casting. Here, we don't have a choice. The reason is TypeScript can't see through down into the implementation, because again, it doesn't have any visibility into the implementation, even with the things I've rewritten here. It just knows here's the overall contract. It'll hand it back. But it might do things that mean that the tag name actually gets changed out from under it before it is a before it is assigned inside this function or this class instantiation, I guess, actually specifically. So everything's back to type checking. That's nice. Going to ignore errors, and that seems fine. This assert seems fine. We'll return null in that case. So yeah, now when we go to test this will be interesting. The mechanics here, let's see how it's set up. We should have an integration test. Yep. We should be able to turn this into a TS file, though I'm going to probably need to do some setup over here to support that. Yeah, I'm going to need to do yarn workspace, Ember, test app, add TypeScript, glint/core at beta, at glint/template at beta, and at glint/environment Ember loose at beta. And with this in place, I will be able to actually convert these over to using a, what's the word I'm looking for? Oh, I'll be able to convert this to being a TS file, and I'll be able to set this up. I need to add a TS config. So test app tsconfig.json. Did I do that wrong? I did. Drat. I just did the above in the wrong place. That's okay. I think. Did I? Yarn is very smart, so it did the right thing. Great. There we go. So now we have a tsconfig.json. This one, similar to the other, is going to do workspace test app add -d at tsconfig/ember. And if we look at the existing TS configs, they're going to be good reference. The root one should build both all the time. The test app, this is going to be very grumpy at me. Whoopsie, this needs to be in its own thing. This one needs to say compiler options, composite true, and references. And this one is going to have a reference to the Ember element helper. This one, TypeScript will have to uncache this. It now exists. It has appropriate references. It says composite true. It needs to say emit declaration only true and no emit false. We're going to have to update our base template for this. This is also going to extend tsconfig/ember. This right now, for historical reasons, has no emit to be true. We're trying to work around that by actually just providing good defaults for TS configs, or not TS configs, but for add-on configs. So like your rollup config or your app level config, where this transpiles using Babel always. So provide the right defaults. People could always stomp this anyway, so that should be fine. This should just work now. And when I come to the test, what I want to do is look up, typed Ember glint, the testing guidelines, which has been a little bit since I did this particular thing. So I'm going to go here and look at rendering tests, and we can pass in a context. I'm on a late enough version of Ember here that I could also actually just use template imports for the test, and I might come back and do that later, but I don't want to start by doing that. In general, I try to do the minimal amount of perturbing of the code to be able to make something type check. If in general, I actually try to avoid making any runtime changes to the code whatsoever. Build time changes are fine, as long as they emit the same thing. But whenever I'm converting, I just try to capture the existing semantics exactly and without alteration. And that means that once I do that, I can be very high confidence that the thing I ship isn't going to break anything. Now, in this case, right, I need to say, here is my... What is the recommendation exactly so that I do the right thing? Publishing add-on type. So I'm going to have new file, template. Man, I'm having a hard time typing today. Registry.d.ts. And I'm going to do exactly this. Import type element helper. And I'm going to export default interface Ember element registry, and element helper is going to be type of element helper. And that should be what we need for this. That should be all we need for this. And then in the test app, I am going to do the exact same thing, but I need to go ahead and do some of the TypeScript setup over in the test app so that we get the same effect as if we were testing this, or consuming this, I should say, in a regular app. So the test app here, this needs a tsconfig that will do paths mapping appropriately. This is the wrong one. Grab the correct one. That's the one. So this is going to need, I could do this with blueprints, but it's fine for right now. I'm going to say that the imports are, or the paths are, test app is going to be /app, and test app /star is going to be app/star. And actually, I'm just going to go look at what the blueprints do. We're working on an RFC to deprecate Ember CLI TypeScript as build pipeline tooling and make it just for generating these kinds of blueprints for you for so long as we need them. I've also been talking with Rob Jackson, RWJ Blue, for a few months now about how we might be able to do export map based things just work as real modules, and TypeScript knows how to consume them. Other build tools know how to consume them, because export maps actually let us make our legacy historic ES module implementation conform to the Node ESM CJS interop, which is really cool. I might show that at a future time. Maybe I'll get Rob on and we'll pair through it or something like that. But I think we can actually make this work. For today, though, I'm just going to go to the docs, not even to the docs on GitHub. I'm just going to go to our blueprint files is a good place to be. And we want, actually it's not even there, it's the TS config. And I need to do paths 4. And here's where it is, so that's the one. So it's just the thing, is add-on, is app. I never remembered these because we wrote them so long ago. And they're also slightly different, but this should be enough, I think. So here, we want this to be able to import I'm going to make a new folder, local types, and this is going to have an index.d.ts, and this is going to import Ember source types and import Ember source types preview, which I'm using 4.9, so we're going to get a lot of this. We're not going to get literally anything in the types directory, and it doesn't even have a bug fix that landed on 4.10 that I should backport. But this will give us the types we need for Ember component, etc. And then I'm also going to import glint environment Ember loose. And with that, I should have everything I need. Yes, we're also going to need yarn add yarn workspace. This is probably going to go badly because we're in the middle of all of this still. At types/qunit, at types/Ember qunit. Yeah, this is all going to go very badly. I may have to drop those in favor of at types for right now because we're in the middle of doing the work to make these things work. We're going to get type errors that fall out of this because it's transitively depending on other at types packages. So yes, Ilya, I'm 100% agreed that Rob is taking a bit of a step back. Burning out is bad, and we don't want that. So we also need QUnit DOM setup, and I never remember how to do that. So I'm going to go to QUnit DOM, and I'm going to go to the README and look at the TypeScript bit. I do this so rarely. Yeah, we just need to do the exact same thing. So here, I'm going to do that, and now everything should just work. Yeah, everything does just work. Now, there are some decisions made about how to do this. This is going to be an array of unknown for the moment, or undefined, and it's going to start out as undefined. Why is it unknown? Okay, ESLint, you're very annoying. This is going to be the type of Ember on error or undefined. Same thing here. ESLint RC. I'm going to need to update this to use at TypeScript ESLint instead. I'm going to come back to that later. Expected Ember errors. That works. This one is annoying. It's a thing we need to change at a very different place. So the template registry, right. What we need to do now is over here in our index.js, we need to say declare module at glint environment Ember loose registry, export default interface registry. And this is actually just going to be extends. I'm going to import the Ember element registry from Ember element helper slash, and the actual path there is going to be template registry. This is not going to work yet because I don't have a build running that's going to emit it. So let's come over here and try to do yarn rollup config. Will this work? Ooh, no, because I stomped my definition of the ensure safe component. It's back to being what it is because I ran yarn. So for the moment, what I'm actually going to do to work around this, and it's not how we're going to work in prod. I'm going to go, before we land this, I'll go open a PR to solve that. I'm going to say, I'm going to make a types, and this tsconfig.json is going to need to say paths ember embroider slash util. I'm going to just lie. And this is a thing to do only in development. You should never, ever, 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 ever do this. Otherwise, just go fix the types upstream. That's what I'm going to do. But I'm going to get this unblocked for the moment. Unpublished development types slash types slash embroider util. I'm just going to hard code this in for the moment. And I'm going to go grab the original copy of it. Where'd it go? I don't know. I'll find it more easily this way. And I'm going to put it here, and I'm going to say C extend string or component like S is going to be C. This is what we did earlier. C extend string component like unknown. Again, we could think about registry shenanigans there, but I don't want to for the moment. Import component like from Glint template. This will be fine for our purposes. It's not good, but oh hey, this doesn't even work. Ilya, no patch package. Bad. It is a useful thing for iteration, but again, I hyper advise not patching package. So this actually doesn't even work, which is good. It means you can't do this thing. That's what I thought. If packages actually publish their own types, you basically can't stop them, which is great. Excellent. I can't even do this trolltastic thing. So I'm actually just going to cd tilde dev, and I am going to gh repo clone. And where did we say that is? Is here. So it's at embroider build slash embroider. And I'm just going to make a PR. I'm going to go ahead and run yarn, or no, this may not be right. Bat package JSON. Is he using PNPM primarily or yarn? Looks like yarn. Ah, and old yarn at that. Okay. We should upgrade that. Yarn 3 is better. PNPM is also better, but Ilya, I see you on the submitting a PR and no reply and managing a fork and all of that. It is sometimes a necessary or useful workaround, but I recommend strongly away from it and trying to find other ways. Even maintaining a fork, as annoying as it can be, does at least make it easy to keep in sync and just keep it up to date. Whereas doing it with a patch package has actually most of the downsides in my experience of a fork, except then you also have to keep that up to date anytime anything changes. This is going to do all the things. And now I'm going to check out a branch, ensure safe component types. Going to go here, and we have util dot. Here's where we are. I want this to have Glint/template needs to be at least 1.0.0-beta.1. And as long as we have that, we'll be fine. And I'm going to go ahead and install here as well exactly that. I'm going to say Glimmer and Glint. Boom. Okay, so I'm going to run yarn again. Ouch, accidentally deleting a fork does indeed sound painful. So this will be an interesting discussion to have. Stability-wise, I think this will be fine for this little utility. But we are going to have to actually talk about it and say, hey, is this a thing that actually makes sense to us? So then I'm going to go back over to here, and this is going to say import component like from Glint template. And, you know, at this point I can just, did I delete it? No, I did not. Victory. But I can get rid of this part. This is all just ESLint nonsense. Yeah. So this should work now. And I'm going to get check in. And it's going to pop up Sublime for me because it's faster than doing it in VS Code. And here I'm going to say introduce a make ensure safe component usable with Glint, etc. And I always try to write good commit messages, but I doubly extra especially do that when I'm committing to open source, where somebody's going to be looking at this who's not me in 5 years and trying to understand what the heck is happening, and I'm not going to be around, or I mean, maybe I am, maybe I'm not, but I shouldn't assume it. And so write a good commit message. Introduce a peer dependency, peer and dev dependency on Glint template for the type of ensure safe component to always return a component like, which is what its implementation does from the point of view of a consumer using Glint. This is really an optional peer dependency, so I'm going to say peer dependencies meta Glint template is optional true. I'm going to come back over here and say this is an optional peer dependency, but should be installed by anyone using TS who wants to use Glint types. Now there's an open question whether that makes it a breaking change. Hello, user Kermorchen. I'm not sure if that's how you say your name, but welcome. Glad to have you here. At the moment, I am figuring out. There's an interesting thing about introducing this peer dependency on Glint. It doesn't need to say etc. here. That may technically be a breaking change, because any existing TypeScript user whose, depending on the type of ensure safe component, will be broken if they don't supply @glint/template here. So it's not actually an optional dependency. There's a hack we can use to work around this, but I don't like it, where you actually just ignore the dependency. So I'm going to have an interesting conversation with the Embroider team about, is this a breaking change for our TypeScript consumers? It is... One argument we might make from a Semver lawyering point of view is that it's not breaking because we've not supported TypeScript officially yet. This is part of the work to support TypeScript, and so all our TypeScript support is still unstable. That's a real thing. This wouldn't be true hopefully a year from now, but for the moment that may actually be a real argument here. I think that's what I'm going with. So I'm going to add it to the commit message. This would be a breaking change if our TS support story were stable. In this case, it is part of making our support story stable. Note. And I'm just going to PR create, and it's going to create a fork. Actually, I'm going to check in and amend. Create, and it's going to ask me, do I want to create a fork? And yes, the answer is yes, I do. I see you, Ilya. Yep, the fun thing of having the stream be just a little bit slow is I could see the question come in, and I knew I had already answered it. Here we go. So this should help. So that'll be solved, and then for the moment, I don't expect to run yarn again, but if I need to, I'll just keep copying and pasting this back over. I'm going to go here like that, and so type check. Now we need to think through some of these other things, and also we need to finish doing this. Extends Ember element registry. This needs to actually be resolved for that to work. Let's try rollup again. TypeScript is slow. People sometimes complain about Rust being slow, and I just want to tell them to go look at TypeScript. Okay, so the rollup config as it stands is not properly pulling on these items. So let's look up rollupconfig.mjs. Public entry points and app re-exports. Now I know this basic structure works because it's how we have things configured in Ember async data. It's almost exactly the same. So we've got our public entry points and our app re-exports. Helpers, modifiers. I'm going to go ahead and say template registry.d.ts and see what happens here. Does it like that? It seems like it doesn't like that. Oh, stop it. That's just ESLint being confused. So there we re-export. That's really interesting. If I make this TS, does it work? And by work, I mean actually generate something over here in the dist. If we blow away everything, looks like the answer is no. But that's potentially because of this. We end up with. Yep. Okay. So we just need to do that. And I'm going to take that back to there. I think we actually don't need those then. We just need to make sure that TS files were included. We're gonna have to think about that. I don't want a JS file for the template registry, so I'll come back to that. Also, the template registry is empty. That is distinctly not what we want. Element is fine here though, so that seems good. Now let's think about what our template registry has in it. We may actually need that rollup config to what are the options for TypeScript? Oh, that's wacky. Okay, so you have a whole bunch of things you can do to customize that. Stop it. So let's look at rollup plugin TS, which is the one we're using, and look at its README and check if I do this rename. So I have an intuition at the moment that if I rename this to a TS file, it may do the right thing. It's going to generate an empty JS file, which we don't want. But yeah, that's what was happening. So we'll need to figure out how to configure this more generally. This will have the right stuff in it now. Yep. And then this will be empty. So we'll need to think about how to make sure we copy it along. It could just be that we just literally copy it. Are we doing anything for that here? We have a template registry, and a rollup config. What happens with this? ls dist, ember async data dist, I should say. We have an empty template registry.js. So that's the thing we're going to want to think through for sure. Because that doesn't make any sense. There's nothing there. There's these type only imports. But now, so I'm going to set this actually up in watch mode so that it reruns anytime it needs to. And here, our template registry should have the right thing. So this should now test app should be depending on that one's actually depending on a concrete version, but that shouldn't matter. Let's look at this real quick. Basically what we want here. So I'm actually going to just copy it over, test, tsconfig. Oh, duh. Easy things to get wrong. Base URL should already be set though. It's set automatically. Our include should already be correct, but just in case. So that should be fine. What does its node modules look like? Is it being properly hoisted? Yes. So you got dist, template registry, etc. Ah, okay. Here's the other thing we need to add. We need to add the, let's go ahead and close embroider. We don't need that anymore. This, and we'll also want to do it with exports. So it's basically going to be identical to this again. We want to actually go ahead and provide a mapping that allows us to say, here's how to get the types TypeScript. Ooh, we have an exports key, do we? Interesting. Okay, so let's make sure these line up. Pretty close. Dist index.js is covered. Dist/star is covered. Cool. I'm just going to replace this one. Oops, don't need to replace both. Do we have an add-on main? We do, and it's going to be CJS because that's how this one is set up. I'm going to have to come back to that particular bit. But this should work correctly for types versions. Here means that if you're on version less than 4.7, so we actually probably want to do, I don't remember the syntax, I always have to look it up. Come over here. tsconfig reference. Types versions. Let's just pop this up in Safari. Oh, this is right. It's not part of the tsconfig, so types versions. There we go. So less than or equal to 4.7. We want to use this. Otherwise, actually, we want to leave this as is. They fixed this so that it's compatible both ways. So if I do that, and now I come over here, I may have to reload the window. That will give me, it's loading. There we go. Yeah, you're wrong. Okay, so now if I come to here, does this have a type? Oh, right, now I have to actually turn on glint. That would help. Glint, for the moment, we're just going to say environment, ember loose, and that'll be sufficient. Guest base URL is not set. That should be fine. Boom. Okay, so it's not showing up in the registry at the moment. That's good. And we need to tweak some stuff, but it's getting to be the right spot. So let's come back here and look at our tsconfig. It's got glint. Glint is running. We're including local types. Boom. Okay, so still doesn't know what it is. Now let's look at element helper registry. It would help if I had given it the right name. Boom. That's a good feeling. We got some work to do yet, but okay, what is tag here? Tag is not the right thing. Okay, so that's coming back as unknown. So let's look at what type of element helper is. This says I am a helper with this signature. And I take these args and I return this. This will be fun. Gotta figure out why. do I have it configured correctly in the registry? That's the next question. So helper and modifier signatures, class-based, we've got args, positional. I always find this much easier to do with function-based ones. And as an aside, that optimization I mentioned earlier where we use it as a map, that would actually let us, you know, actually do the, oh, that's the wrong thing. What's the, I don't think you actually need to do that. Yeah, that's correct, because the super in this case is nothing. We could just use a function-based helper if we use that approach instead. Hello, what's wrong here? Oh, come on. Okay, something about the interaction between ESLint and prettier here is getting quite annoying. That's a thing to solve later. Yeah, go ahead and fix all auto-fixable problems. Thank you. These can actually all just be up here. Embroider. Yep, fix it. No, that's actually not what I wanted. That's odd. Component helper, debug, embroider, and glint. Why is it coming back as unknown? That's the interesting question now. It might be because I'm trying to be too clever here. So let's comment this out and go back to this one. Let's see what it thinks. This is using some private API. Woohoo! Let element. This is the part where I'm sitting here thinking, okay, this is something dumb. I've seen this before. I know what the issue is, but I can't bring it up. The problem is not the invocations. Once I fix this part, it'll all be fine. It's why is the result of invoking the element helper producing unknown rather than producing what it should, which, let's see here, this helper and modifier signatures. Oh, because I'm stupid. We need to write a lint rule for this. Yeah, okay. So index can't be used to index type globals. We're now back at that mode. I'm going to go back to commenting this out. So we've got something else that's a little janky at the moment, but that should be fine. Does not like this way of writing an overload. That's very interesting to me. So this now it's getting correctly, and it's falling back to unknown again. What am I doing wrong? Follow the chain. Ilya, that's a great question. Unfortunately, the answer is no. We looked at this. So the question for folks from the chat is whether we could have a type error that catches, hey, this is not the right thing. We can have a lint error that catches that, and we need to. But unfortunately, if you do that, you hit points in the type system where it just bails on you. And there are a couple reasons. One is the easiest way to show this is actually with a quick demo. So if I say interface signature extends, the way you would naturally think of to do this is something like this. Record of args or return. We can even just do it with return, actually. From return to unknown. It can be anything that extends that, right? The problem is interface my signature extends signature. Potato. Yep. Is totally legitimate. More importantly, returns is totally legitimate because that extends just says it's going to be something that has this type in it. It's not saying it's something that must match that type when I extend it later. In the same way, the subclass that has a return field on it can add a returns field if it so desires. That's not super annoying or super fun in this case, but no, we actually just can't constrain it. If we were doing declaration merging, we could constrain it, but we're not doing that. So we don't have any way to enforce the contract. We can do it with linting, but we can't do it with the actual type system, which is too bad. But we're still in a situation where it's doing the wrong thing. Let's just double check that everything is updating the way we expect by commenting this out and uncommenting this, doing a save. This should now have the right thing. So it does. Element here is still producing unknown. Okay, so we're saying that we are a helper which our arguments are right, because if these things didn't match, it wouldn't type check. And we should be producing a signature, or via this signature, I should say. Helpers are funky. So if this were just a function, I'm pretty sure this would be working, but positional, let's double check the signature again. I helped write this and it's still tricky. So it's positional, args, positional, named if any, return. Look at the registry, it's the type of that thing. That's the right thing. Yep. Okay, it has to be the class side. That's correct. This is the part where I'm just about to think about busting out the glint intermediate representation flag because I'm stymied. I'm trying to think. Let's do something silly for a moment and say, in our own registry over here, local types index. Let's just make something very simple. Declare class add extends helper add sig and interface add sig is going to be args positional. We're only going to allow you to add 2 numbers. So number, just very simple. Return number. And this should have add type of add. So if I come over here and I say test la di da async function cert await render HBS let add 1 2 as result / let, and here we should be able to say add 3 result and it should type check, and so it does. Okay, so it is something funky, not about the syntax I'm using, but very specifically about this signature. So what is actually going on with this signature? Args positional looks correct. The registry is wired up correctly. That was the main thing I wanted to validate. Everything here is doing the right thing. We have a class which extends helper. We have a class which extends helper, which applies this element signature, which is No, it's not just you, Ilya. I also like getting everything lined up. I think part of it is type Tetris can be fun. It's also a nerd snipe to a great degree. But also, when you do it, you have a higher degree of confidence that what you've done is actually the thing that you need it to be. Okay, so it is, in fact, yep. It's something about taking in... So I can delete all of this. So I just modified the signature here to just be the simpler form, and it now it works in the tests. This test won't work, but you'll note that tag is now the correct thing. I probably need to rename it. Overloads with class-based helpers are hard to get just right. So why was it that I bet I can do this. Let's try this. So let's use this signature. But what I'm going to do is say name extend string or null or undefined, and tag name is just going to be name. And then type of tag for string or null or undefined is going to be name extend string, then component like on that, else null. And this, then I need to propagate this everywhere, or null or undefined. Tag name is just name, and then this is element for name. Come on, fix all prettier problems. Here I'm going to write this as non-nullable name. Almost there. This just needs to be element for name, that's why. And then, or null. No, it's element for name, which may be null. I don't think we need that. Maybe we do. Yeah, so what I'm going to do to make this work for the moment is as element for non-nullable name, just not happy with that. So the problem is now I've encoded the nullability into the type here, and this needs to return element for name. Oh yeah, the other thing we should do is actually use the owner type in the other thing. Has an owner. String or null or undefined. This should also be string or null or undefined. Update the value. God, I hate. Yeah, okay, so that's fine though. If the tag name is a string, then yeah, that's not a safe cast. Oh, wrong thing. Right. This is what it actually needs to be here. Still doesn't like that. This is the annoying bit about TypeScript. So we have a bunch of casts in here. Again, I think I can get rid of almost all of these, but I'm just trying to. So the hard thing with TypeScript is not when you start with TypeScript. The hard thing with TypeScript is when you don't start with TypeScript and then you try to capture the semantics of existing JavaScript code correctly. And now we're back to this thing doesn't work because reasons. What? So give me local types, index. There's no template registry. You are full of lies. I can see your template registry. It has element on it right there. You're very confused. Okay, let's reload the window. Sometimes when you're doing it. So one of the problems we have here is we're using rollup to generate the types. And for development, you really want TypeScript to generate the types for you. Everything works now. Ta-da! Now we have a bunch of these inner HTML things to fix. And hey, we're using private API here. We need an ensure safe component entry, which does the exact same thing as we're showing there. So here, oh right, I haven't had this open now. So this is another case where we'll need it though. We'll need to have an ensure safe component in our thing here. This will have something like this goes to import type ensure safe component from embroider util. The one, yep. Type of ensure safe component. So this should exist now. So it's working correctly, but it's not type checking correctly. So now we've hit another interesting thing. And I actually have to wrap up for the day at this point. But the next thing to figure out here is what is key of got it. So the type of component here is the issue. We may need to make a tweak about this. Oh yeah, there's an open bug that I think Dan already fixed actually. We just don't have in a release yet that makes this do the right thing. Now the trick is in this case so this, we need to think about the right way to solve this. This should work. Component should accept a class, but there's not actually a reason to accept a class. This invocation here is nonsense. And Glint is actually telling us, hey, this is nonsense. It doesn't make any sense. Because as long as you're on, now the reason this does matter is because it's only nonsense from Ember 3.25 forward. From Ember 324 and before, you actually would have had to do this even with ensure safe component. But because at that point you can just invoke a class starting in Ember 325, which was a long time ago now, Glint's telling you you don't need this. That being said, we do support older versions of Ember to some extent, so we may want to think about how do we actually tackle this. Should component accept a class? The answer is probably yes, but it's not obvious that the answer is definitely yes. And it's also clear that, oh, that's very interesting. This type is actually not quite right. I'm going to have to talk to Ember folks besides me to think through. So the helper for ensure safe component says it needs a thing with an owner on it. But when we were looking at it, So here's the bit. There's also this helper. So what we want is to export this as well. Got it. So it exports the helper in this mode. We'll want to go ahead and do import helper. Like, we could actually just do that, yeah. We don't need to couple it to the class definition, or we can say export class ensure safe component helper extends helper like over. This is going to have the exact same set of constraints, so we'll do the exact same thing. Do this, and we're going to say the args will be positional. Component is C, and it's going to return, not returns, same thing. C extends string component like, look, you can get concrete or not, but there we go. Interface extends. And then when we come back over here, again, we can just copy this whole thing to be our local version of it and make sure it checks. And here we're going to actually do ensure safe components helper. Open this and make it see that, unsure. That's a different word. That's a lie. Blast. This does need to be a class. No. Export type equals that. And now we don't need type of, we just need that, I believe. Yes. Right, so all of these work now because ensure safe component comes back as, no, it doesn't, LOL. Helper like. Got it. So this actually should just do the right thing. Yeah, duh. Don't try to be so clever, Chris. We just want to do import type helper, ta-da, export class, extends, helper, ta-da. This should be, you're still confused about that. Reload the window, it'll reload everything, and we'll be in a good spot now. Glint is up. Yep, that's the right thing. This has the issue we saw before where component doesn't want to take that. This is probably going to have to be something like, or component like, and it would presumably check then, but that's the wrong thing. We're not going to do that. So I'll have to talk to Dan and James about that, but made a bunch of progress. Counter. What is this counter type? You presumably have something that's like a counter somewhere. What? Oh, good grief. That's an annoying test. GJS will solve that one quite nicely. But I'll figure out the rest of this later. Thanks for watching, folks. Hopefully that was informative and illuminating. I learned some things. Hopefully you learned some things. And with that, I'm out. Have a good day.